only have to ask a stupid question once. You ask a stupid question, and if you're in a crowd and you ask a stupid question, 80% of people in the crowd have the same question. You're just too crowdly to ask. But you ask and then someone actually tells you, you never have to ask that question again. You're no longer stupid. What stupid thing am I doing that I could quit doing? That I would quit doing, because those aren't the same thing, right? Because you know there is a stupid thing that you're doing that you're just not going to quit doing because you like them. But there might be something on the edge there where you could stop that. If you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you gotta mean this. You gotta be desperate. This is no game. This is my life. My life is not everything I want it to be, and perhaps it's not everything that I need it to be. And by need, I mean my life is so unbearable that the suffering that's the attendant upon that has made me nihilistic, cynical, bitter, resentful, driving your proclivity to see evil everywhere except within my own heart. These are problems, man. And you ask yourself, sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm ready to learn something. What's one thing am I doing wrong? That I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix. It's like you meditate on that. You will get an answer, and it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one, and it's often something that will point you to a small thing. Like that work, you start making those micro improvements, like real micro improvements, real on the ground, actual micro improvement thing. You know that you're wrong. You will improve unbelievably rapidly. The great people I know are brutally truthful to themselves and the other people, and they have insanely adventurous lives. Get rid of everything you say that you only say to impress the people. You just see if you can see what you believe to be true. That's adventure. That's the thing about the truth. Well, you gotta ask yourself, if you're not speaking the truth, who's that talking? If you're saying something that you do not believe to be true, it's not talking, it's something else. It might be a part of you that wants to manipulate the other person into delivering what you think you want from them. Well, what's the spirit of manipulation that you've allowed to possess you? It's not you. Let's say you decide to live your whole life in instrumental manner. You're gonna craft your word like student who says, well, I'm gonna write what the professor wants to hear so I get the grade. It's like, well, you just turn yourself into that. Well, who is it that doing right, manipulating? It's not you, because those aren't your words. So even if you get the grade, it's not you that got the grade. It's the false you. It's the manipulative you. So you do that your whole life. You do not have your life, and then you think, well, God, that was a miserable life. I manipulated everybody. They were so damn stupid. They were sucked in it by it. They're all contemptible. Everyone does it, which they do not. By the way, and so that's the pathway to bitterness. Partially because if you're a manipulator and you can see your language falsely, you do not live your own life. You live the life of whatever possesses you when you think it's manipulating. And so you live the life of the spirit of manipulation. There is a book, it's a book called About Face. It's about the guy that was a Korean War, and then he was in a Vietnam War, and his name was Colonel David Hackworth. When I was on deployment, I would open up that book anywhere and I would read 2 pages or 3 pages before I would go to bed if I was in my bed at night. And there were so many lessons that correlated to what I was actually going through. And the real obvious example was, when you read, you can learn, and you do not have to go through the school of hard knocks. You don't have to get punched in the face repeatedly with things that to be situations that other people have absolutely gone through. The level of capability increases so much by seeing something one single time. If I see something one time, I'm infinitely better than if I would never seen it before. It's like those little puzzles. They gave you a little puzzle, a mind bender, right? The mind bender only worked on you one time. The riddle only works on you one time. Then you go, I know the answer, so that's the answer. You never get fooled by that again. So just seeing it one time, you're infinitely better. So when you read enough, you're capturing all these lessons. Of course, you want to put the book on. You want to become that person that can rattle you up, man. Especially if the person is thinking all sort of thing that you've never thought. I mean, I love reading for that reason. I could pick my peers too, which I really love. It's like, well, I have these people around me, but then there is 3 people who've lived before me and in different places, and I can set them up on my shelf. I can enter into their world and can benefit from everything that they've thought and saturate myself with that person. It's very disruptive, especially if the person you've reading has a mind that's more powerful and more developed than your own. It was very disruptive, but unbelievably useful to try on other people like that, and you get the benefit of their entire life distilled into their book. It's a 3 years of work. I read this one book called The Neuropsychology of Anxiety, which is a great scientific work. It's a very hard book. I think it has 1800 references, something like that. And this guy, Jeffrey Gray, has actually read all those references and he understood them. And so it took me 6 months to read the book, but I got an entire education out of it. I got to experience in 6 months what it took him 30 years to learn. Like, what a gift that is. It's unbelievable. What were you reading when you were in the university? Was it fiction, novel? Was it non-fiction? What were you focusing on? As trite as this may sound, it was actually the most impact was from Shakespeare. It was the most impact on multiple levels, and I'll tell you the primary level. And when I've covered Shakespeare on my podcast, I explain this to people. People think, well, I didn't really understand. I read it and understand it. If you think you're gonna just pick up Shakespeare, open it up and read it and understand it, you're not gonna too, because it's barely written in English. It's almost another language. So what you have to do is you have to start to interpret it. And so what I realized with Shakespeare is, number one, the weight of the words. And these words were so pregnant with meaning that you had to pull those words and parse those words and pull those words apart to see all the depths and each individual word had. And then the way that they're pulled together. And what was great about this way by the time I was back, because I went right back into the seal names and somebody would hand me a rules of engagement document that was written by someone lawyer in Washington DC, and I would put it out and say, wait a second, I don't know what that word means. Let's pull this word out. Let's see what this actual definition of this particular word is and how that changes my viewpoint of these rules of engagement, and how can I translate that for my troops so that they actually know what to do. So that part for me was from reading perspective, starting to read Shakespeare and saying, oh, okay, you're not gonna understand this, and if you don't understand something, that's okay. You pull out the Oxford English Dictionary and you look it up, and then you not just found out what the meaning of the word is, but what's the root word and where does it come from and what depth and what and that's unbelievably useful too. Virtually every word is like that because a word is an ancient artifact. It's like an animal in some sense. It has an evolutionary history and it transforms across time, and each word, it carries the echoes of past with it, because each word attracts other word in particular unique way. So it lives a word ecosystem as well, and the ecosystem contains information about the history of that word. And you think, well, why is that important? It's like, well, hey, guess what? You think it's a word. You talk in words. You have all these archaic entities, these words, these living entities that you see and use. It's like more you know about them, the more you know about you, the more you know about other people, and the more you are at formulating and communicating your ideas. There is nothing lost in investigation. There is nothing but gain here. Your ambition, if you have any sense, it's actually to become competent. Do you want to be competent, confident, and dangerous, or do you want to be vague or useless? It is definitely the case that there is no more exceptional form of the capacity to be dangerous than to be articulate. And so it's moral endeavor in some real sense to become articulate is to become the master of your own tongue. Every advantage comes with a disadvantage. If you're extroverted, you're social and you're positive, but you're impulsive, you can tilt toward Hinduism, and you cannot stand being alone. No matter where you land in a temperamental landscape, you're gonna have your associated faults fault and temptation. You got a goal. You will see that as you progress toward that goal, there will be obstacles that emerges, and some of them you do not want to confront. That's why it's useful to order your room. Chaotic room makes you anxious. Why? Too many pathways, man. People do not really repress the thing they do not want to face. They just fail to unpack them. You want a horizon of ever expanding possibility. You rebuild to walk uphill, and when you reach the pinnacle of the hill, you want to stop and appreciate the vision. But the next thing you want is a higher hill in the distance. Be aware of unintended consequences. It's like, oh no, the thing will just do what I wanted to do and nothing else. It's like, no, it turns out that not only is what we want from each other the real thing, but that's also the adventure of your life. And so if you aren't truthful, and that means, unfortunately, especially at the beginning, when you start to be truthful, it means deeply coming to terms with your inadequacies and humility. So it's very painful. Without that, you have the advantage of your life. You have the role that you've acquiesced to, and that's take all the meaning of your life. It's good for you to go take your place in the world. Have some ambition, have a vision, have a goal, have a strategy. Try to be a good person, not because it's your duty precisely, because that's the proper way to live. You sit on the bed and say, okay, man, I'm really to learn something. What one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong that I could fix? You meditate on that. You will get an answer. You grow in a preparation to the weight you take on voluntarily. And it's also true that we have no idea what the upper limit to that is. It's from the uphill climb that we derive our value. And I mean this technically. So almost all the positive emotion we feel, especially the emotion that fills up with enthusiasm, and that's experienced in relationship to a goal. And so in some senses, we want the goal that you can never attain, so you can always move closer to the goal that recedes as you move towards it. You think, well, that's frustrating. It's like Sisyphus pushing the rock uphill. It's not because as you pursue the goal, you put yourself together and your life doesn't get better and richer, more abundant. That's why the highest level of virtue and goal are in some sense transcendent. You want them to be above everything you're doing, so you can continually move toward something that's more sublime and better. That's why you're here, live, not to sleep. And the problem with vision of Mai Tais on the beach is that, well, first of all, there is a vision of drag included unconsciousness. Second, it's only gonna work for about a week. Third, you're gonna be laughing stuck in a month and depressed and aimless and goalless. No, that's not. You want a horizon of ever expanding possibility. And so it does happen to people because they've stacked their soul on the attainment of an instrumental goal. And it can be a pretty high order goal. But then you think, now I'm there. Now what? Well, the answer cannot be, well, I'm gonna live in a lap of luxury and never have to leave the fate. What do you want to be? A giant infant with a gold bottle. You never have to do anything but lay in your bag and suck. It's like you see that the problem with that as a conceptualization. It's no. You want to be like an active warrior moving uphill with your sword in hand. That's the dynamic. That's exciting. People are afraid of the truth because often if you reveal it, it causes conflict in the moment. Telling the truth is definitely an adventure, seeking for sure, but also telling another way of going about it is to just say what you think and see what happens. That's an adventure because you don't know what the outcome is gonna be. Look, there is this old idea that it's necessary to have faith in the truth. Here is a way of thinking about it. Someone asks you a question and you might think, well, here is the outcome I want, so here how I'm gonna answer that question. That's one way of approaching it. But another way of approaching it is, you ask me a question, I'm gonna think about the answer. I'm just gonna tell you what I think. It doesn't matter what the outcome is because I'm willing to see what the outcome will be, predicted on the idea that there isn't a better outcome than one the truth produces, even if it's harsh and terrible in the short term. And sometimes it is. It's like there isn't better way of doing it. Now you want say, well, how do you know that? The answer is, well, I do not do that. That's why an entire article of faith, because I believe, and I believe this deeply, that being that you produce a consequence of telling the truth is good by definition, even though it's harsh and often uncomfortable because you get in trouble. One of the things that I've really learned recently to articulate better is that there is a very high relationship between inspiration ambition and responsibility. The first question might be, do you need to aspire to something? And the answer is, well, yes, because you have to do something. If you just sit there, you will die. You cannot just sit there. You have to go act out in the world. Okay, so act toward what? Well, that's whatever your aspiration is. You have to have an aim. Okay, well, what should be the aim? Well, it should be something worth doing. Let's say, why do something that you do not feel is worth doing? What do you think it's worth doing, especially worthwhile? Usually judge them positively if you see that there is taking responsibility, at least for themselves. But do you want to be completely useless? So that other people have to take care of you? That's pretty pathetic. Maybe you could get your act together so you're taking care of yourself and your family. Maybe you could even do better than that. You take care of yourself and your family and your community. Well, good for you. That's responsibility and that's an aim. Well, here is one of the things that's cool about that. It's your life doesn't have meaning without aspiration or an aim. Okay, so you need a hierarchy of values. There is nothing to be something at the top. It's got to be something important. If you do not have that, your life doesn't have any meaning. So if you criticize the hierarchy or even the idea of hierarchy, you destroy the idea of aspiration. And then people, you have nothing. Well, that's not helpful. People are built for a struggle and they're built for a weight. So you want to take on a heavy burden voluntarily. See if you can put yourself together. See what you can do out in the world while you're waiting to die. It's an all-in game. It's better to worthwhile a while. If you gaze into a abyss long enough, you see the light, not the darkness. I'm betting my life on it. Bring it on. The adventure along the road, man. I would say, where is the adventure to be found? You do not want to be something else, Faith, man. You're faith enough and your adventure is enough. It's plenty. It's more than you can ever fully realize. And so that's also a part of reason that we all believe that the individual has some intrinsic dignity. It is, don't be so sure what the position in your room is so damn trivial. Maybe might be your attitude towards it. It's trivial. And if you're in dire straits and dire circumstances, just look at how much opportunity you have to make things better. Well, maybe the same thing is true of life, right? You bind yourself to it, and the higher you bend yourself to it, and the more find out what it is. And that's like a radical embrace. You're built a walk uphill. When you reach the pinnacle of the hill, you want to stop and appreciate the vision. But the next thing you want is higher hill in distance, because its form is from the high climb that we derive our value. Almost all the positive emotion we feel, especially the emotion that fills up with enthusiasm, that's experienced in relationship to a goal. And so, in some sense, you want a goal that you can never attain. There is nothing that makes you more formidable than verbal competence and being able to articulate, to be able to think and marshal your arguments. Aim yourself in one direction. You might say, well, I've gone halfway down this path and I found that it's wrong. How do you distinguish that from just giving up? Well, that's really hard question. It's moral hazard. But then the absolute is, yeah, but you have to play one of them. You have to learn to play one of them. You have to become an expert at least one of them. Then that's not a relative proposition. I believe that's sure. You want to commit to something. Then when you commit to something, you require to prepare yourself to bring all your disparate components moving in a single direction, united in single direction. So it's unifying act. You said that a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has the under voluntarily control. Who should people become more dangerous? Becoming more articulate is definitely, I would say, there is primary area of weapons. Physical powers is something, and it's not nothing that physical confidence that comes along with that as well. But the same thing replied at the level of ability to communicate, to think. That's a way of broader field of battle and opportunity. In a world with seemingly infinite options, it can be challenging to decide on the best course of action for one's life. Peterson suggested a useful approach to focus on what bothers you or what you find most challenging. These discomforts or challenges can be indication of where you should focus on their time and energy. By learning into what is difficult or uncomfortable, individual can discover their strength and find direction in their lives. Be honest with yourself about your interests, abilities, and limitations, and pursue the path that aligns most closely with your values and passions. There is a lot of things you could be bothered by, like a million things, man. But some things rip you, they bite you, they might make you resentful, bitter. better because they bite you so much. They're your thing, man. They've got you. So then I look for a question that I would like to answer to. I would really like to answer to it. So I don't assume I already have the answer because I would actually really like to have the answer. So if I could get the better answer, great. That's the first thing. That's like a prayer. It's like, okay, here's a mystery. I would like to delve into the further. It's humility. It's like, here is a mystery, which means I don't know. I would like to delve into it further, which means I don't know enough already. Then comes the revelation. It's like, well, what is a revelation? Well, if you ask yourself a question, it's a real question. Do you get an answer or not? The answer is, well, yeah. Thoughts start to appear in your head. So, from somewhere. That's right, from somewhere. Where do they come from? Do you have a sense? It depends on what you're aiming at. It depends on your intent. So, imagine that your intent is to make things better. Then maybe you come from that place that designed to make things better. Maybe your intent is to make things worse. Then they come from hell. Let's say you want to become who you could be in the fullest sense. So let's say you're someone who's gonna solve some serious problems. Okay, the first thing you have to do is to admit the strenuous or problem. That's not joke. So your first thing, just terror the problem itself and enough to paralyze you, right? And then Hydra, that's Gordon with the head of the snakes. It'll paralyze you and turn you at stone. That's the ballistic in the Harry Potter series. You look at it and turns you to a stone like under math everything, right? And it's malevolence and tragedy, and so there is that. And then the next thing is, well, you're gonna take responsibility for that. You're really gonna do that, are you? That's a hell of a load, man. And so it's daunting to even consider that. And then there is a discipline and responsibility that necessitates, which is also daunting. It's like, oh my god, the problem is that serious. I'm really gonna have to get my act together in order not to contribute to it, much less solve it. And so the problem is terrible, and then the solution is daunting. But upside of that is, it's like, well, there isn't anything better to have than a problem that's worth solving, like really worth solving, right? And so more of you take on, and more you have reason to get out of the bed in the morning. No matter what, I think I'm getting up, I'm touching forward. It doesn't matter what I'm suffering from. I've got things that need to be done, that's necessary, and that gives you the sense of purpose. That's an antidote or to bitterness. Okay, well, let's say you want your life to be meaningful. It's like, okay, then what do you matter? It actually matters. So then, an interesting thing, and let's say you go over your past with a fine-tooth comb, and you decide you're gonna take responsibility for everything that you did that was wrong, and everything that you failed to do that you could have done that was right. It's like, does that change the world? It's like it depends on how thoroughly you do it. You might say it changes the world like nothing else possible can, and I think that's actually right. You have to allow yourself a certain latitude of error. That's useful thing to know too. One of the things I tell people when they're trying to develop a vision of their life or an implementable plan, it's make bad plan, maybe the best one you can, but don't get obsessive about it. It's like, make a plan, implement it. You will figure out when you implement it why it's stupid. Exactly, and then you can fix it a little bit. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. The same basic idea, right? Is that you have to get your makes for success right, because otherwise you can end up in the situation you describe, which is that like there is always people out there who are doing far better than you're pretty much anything you want to imagine. And if you all are doing is seeing yourself in the reflected light, let's say, you shouldn't just compare. Well, first of all, there is a danger in just comparing yourself to other periods, because there is nothing, and God only knows what they're currently carrying that you're not aware of. You just don't know any of that, but you can certainly contrast yourself with yourself, and that's a lot better. And it's only way, well, it's the only way of really measuring anything, approximating proper improvement. You can actually tell what you're a little better than you were yesterday, right? So, and you can actually do that. There is another thing that's so interesting about it, is that you can actually make yourself a little better in some ways, pretty much. Well, I don't know if it's every moment, but you can certainly do it every day. It's funny, I mean, you know, absolutely. And obviously, if you have a problem and you think about it, you can think up a solution, and that's not obvious. How do you do that, you know? I mean, it's not like, you know, how you're manipulating your nervous or something. It happens of its own accord in some sense. Like you can participate in it, I guess. You can infinite, and it seems to take certain amount of willpower, but it still all happen mysteriously behind the scenes. One of the things I've been so there is lots of different ways to interpret the world, so you can maybe even make a case that there is an endless number of ways to interpret the world. And the problem with that is that it kind of disorients you in terms of what you should be doing. But just because there is a very large number of ways to interpret the world doesn't mean there is a very large number of productive, meaningful, and sustainable ways to interpret the world. And one of the things you don't have to is figure out how you can conduct yourself today so that you do not upset in a week or a month or a year. And so, you know what you do in interferes is fully, and then you start opening the door in different kinds of thinking, which is more creative thinking. It's more literally thinking, saying, well, I'm wrong, but that's not necessarily a problem because I could be right if I thought some other way. Well, no, that's great. Often it works, and there is almost no luck. There is almost no end to the utility of trying to figure out which ways that you're wrong. Yeah, because there is lots of them, and every time to discover one, then you do not have to be quit so wrong anymore. That's really good deal. Yeah. What's your time worth? You're a university student. Well, certainly worth meaning wage, because obviously, but it's worth way more than that, because if you send a productive hour when you're 20, then you gain the benefits of that hour for the rest of your life. So there is a compounding effect of time spent where you are young. So I say, well, let's assume your time is worth $50 an hour, which I think it's underestimated, but whatever, let's call it 50. We call it 25, but we call it 50. That's 2,000 a week we're wasting. It's 100,000 a year. It's like how much bigger would be your life if you weren't wasting 1,100 years. Da Vinci Code, everyone liked it. It sold a lot, and it was for little mysteries, and it was full of hints that there was more to be world than you think, which is definitely true. And there was a way of getting access to that knowledge, and that would be really worthwhile. And people like that. They like that idea, and the reasons for that is because it's actually the truth. Learn to write. I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious about that. Because writing is formalized thinking, and so the way you write it first of all, you need a problem, because why write if you don't have a problem? So this is a good advice if you're just wanting writing an essay. By the way, your class is your like. Pick a bloody problem that you want to write about, because otherwise it's false like from the start. It's up to you to engage with material until you find something that grips you, that you desire or to investigate. Okay, you need a problem. Well, the next thing you need to is, well, you need to have some to say about problems. So reading is really good for you. Read as much as you get your hands on that address a problem. Okay, so now you know a bunch of things, at least professionally known them. You at least have access to them. Well, now you start sorting through it. It's like, okay, well, maybe I need to summarize what I've learned. Then I need to iron out the contradiction between what I learned, and I need to elegantly formulate that. And I need to get my word choice right, and my phrase choice right, and my sentence choice right. And I need to organize the sentence into proper paragraphs, and then paragraphs into proper sequences, so that I have a coherent argument. And at the same time you're doing it is you're integrating your own personality at the highest and most abstract level of organization, and you're sharpening your tool, and you're putting yourself straight because you're learning to read. You learn to do that by writing many years. You hone your words. Your most powerful thing about me, bar none. If you're an effective writer or speaker or communicator, you have all the authority and competence that there is. And so you're at university, maybe you're taking humanities degree. Well, what the humanities degree is? It's teach you how to think. You learn to think by writing. Now there is more to read, speak, all of that. But the best thing you can do is read and write every day, couple of years, couple of hours every day. Write about thing you find important, and see if you can consider what you believe true, and that will build you a foundation, and unbelievably practical. Like if you look at the people who are phenomenally successful across life, and there is a various reason, but one of them is that they're unbelievably good at articulating what they want, they're aiming at, and strategizing and negotiating that, and enticing people with vision toward. It's like, get your work together, man. That mistake you unstoppable. That core of humanities. The idea, it's get your work together, make yourself an articulate creature, and then you're deadly in the best possible way. Take that seriously. The best thing you can do is teach people to write, because there is no difference between that thinking. One of the things that blows me away about university is that no one ever tells students why they should write something. It's like, well, you have to do this assignments. Well, why are you writing? Well, you need that degrade. It's like, no, you need to learn think, because thinking makes you act effectively in the world. Thinking makes you win the battles you undertake. Those could be battles for good thing. If you can think and speak and write, you're absolutely literally nothing can get in your way. That's why you learn to write. It's like, why? I cannot believe that people aren't just told. It's like most powerful weapon you could possibly provide someone with. I know lots of people who've been strategically successful and watched them throughout my life. Those people, you do not want to have an argument with them. They'll just slash you into pieces, and not in a malevolent way. It's like, if you're gonna make your point and they're gonna make their point, you better have your point organized, because otherwise you're gonna look and be an absolute idiot. You're not doing and going to get anywhere. The truth of the matter is that you have a lot of potential as a child, but none of that is capable of manifesting itself and freedom before you become disciplined. Discipline is a matter of imposition of order, and the order is necessary, especially for people who are hopeless and nihilistic. What does it mean? Well, it does mean, Jesse, I had getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning and get ready for work. That means, but I would start with lack of discipline before rearranging your whole life, because you might say, well, I hate getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning no matter what I'm doing. And then it's not your job. I do not do difficult thing. Watch yourself, and if you see that you're doing things that make you hate yourself, then consider the cost of continuing. If something's valuable, you will make sacrifice to attain it. That discovery of sacrifice, I think that's what separates human. It's one of primary factors separating human being from animals, because we discovered that we could let go of something we value in the present, and we would gain something we value even more in the future. Lay a disciplinary structure on yourself, get in the chaos in check, and then you can move toward to a state that's fear, because it's discipline first. Look, if you're gonna become a concert pianist, there is going to be several thousand hours of extraordinary discipline practice. That's the imposition of order on your potential, let's say. But what comes out of that? It's much greater, grander freedom. And so virtually every freedom that you have in life, that's your freedom, is purchased at the price of discipline. And it is not some casual self-help doctrine. It's that if you don't organize yourself properly, you will pay for it in a big way. So, well, people around you, and I would say, start where you can start. If something announces itself to you as you in need of repair, you could repair, then hey, fix it. You can fix 100 things like that. Your life will be a lot different now. I often tell people to fix the thing you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial. You get up, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you have your routines, so you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. People think, well, they're mundane. I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important thing you do, hands down. While there isn't anything better to have than a problem that's worth solving, that's really worth solving, the more of that you can take on, the more you have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, no matter what. I'm getting up, I'm trudging forward. It doesn't matter what I'm suffering. I've got things I need to be done. They're necessary, and that gives you a sense of purpose that is antidote to bitterness. There is a lot of reasons, because I've thought from a long time. Imagine you have a choice in front of you become to do. So here is a choice. Your life is either meaningful or meaningless. So let's go through the meaningless part of first. Because you'll think, well, of course, I don't want it to be meaningless. It's like, yeah, just hold on a second. Nothing you do matter. It's the same as the first. Impulsive pleasure is the order of the day. No responsibility. You can do whatever you want. It's like Pleasure Island in the Pinocchio. It's like Neverland in the Peter Pan. You're still a kid. You can play all the time. Impulse pleasure and no responsibility. That's rewards for meaningless. But then the other side is, okay, well, let's say you want your life to be meaningful. It's like today. Then what do you matter? It actually matters. You make a mistake, haunts you, hurt your family, hurt your world in a deeper way you can think of. And you have to be awake to that. And then you have to take it on yourself. So you're at the particular stage right now. And that stage would involve perception and behaviors. But that's not enough, because you haven't master the whole world and you're making mistakes at all the times. And then the other neurological mechanism, so maybe that's more left hemisphere phenomenon, the institution of the other identity. That's the right hemisphere mechanism that are tracking your errors and keeping track of them. And the errors are an indication that your theory is incomplete. So the errors accumulate, that information around the errors accumulates. Another identity starts to become formulated and it solves all the problem your previous identity did, but also some additional ones. When you have an moment like that, it's manifestation and the next identity that's making itself known because it's being built from the bottom up. It's explicit you. They'll encounter an explicit statement. You mentioned a couple of there. They map onto that. Then that's it's like yo, yes. That's what ties together the things that I've been wrestling with in the back of my mind. Someone made it explicit, and that's one of the great thing about language. That's also fill it in gaps too, because you can start to make argument based on the observation that I have. That's the manifestation. What's wrong with long-term consequences of acting? So many people, especially because of the world I live in Instagram, in social media, we built out these persons. We almost follow the implicit infrastructure that came with those persons. Well, that's the problem, right? There is that I think Pinocchio is a brilliant work of art if you're a puppet or an actor, and Pinocchio is a both time in that movie, both puppet and actor. So why an actor? Why is there something wrong with being an actor? Well, the first question is, well, you sit your role, and then the second question is you pull your strings. So you've put on this first front that there is to make it popular and sexy and desirable, and to mask from yourself your own inadequacies. But that's role. Well, who wrote it and for what purpose? And maybe you're acting out a tragedy, maybe you're acting out a narcissist. You don't know, but you've put that on yourself in an attempt in some ways to deliver to people that you want, to more actually to look as though you're delivering to people what they want. And it's not nothing to do that, right? Because at least you're attempting in some sense to adapt to the social world. Someone who's really infinital or dependent, someone who's never left home, part of their problem is that they haven't crafted a persona. So you do not want to denigrate it entirely, but it's no substitute for real thing. And it turns out that not only is what we want from each other the real thing, but that's also the adventure of your life. And so if you aren't truthful, and that matter, unfortunately, especially at the beginning, when you start to be truthful, it means deeply coming to terms with your inadequacies in humanity. So it's very painful. Without that, you do not have the adventure of your life. You have the role that has been, you've acquiesced this, and all take all the morning out of your life. Imagine that the world was consisted, so the true adventure of your life emerged as a consequence of truth, speech, and action, because that would be reflective of the reveals you. So it would be you living that imagine. Then the adventure you could echo if dwindle in the truth would be so overwhelming that it would justify all the suffering. It's really contended with this idea of struggle and chaos in my life, and the role is placed. And once upon a time, I thought I was trying to write my life of chaos and struggle. I thought that's why I was trying to get rich and get the Ferrari and the blunt. I thought that would create a life free of struggle. Then I looked at some studies and I heard about this thing called gold medal depression. When Olympians come back from the Olympics and they've lost orientation, I try to understand the role that struggle would have to play to me to fulfill human being for the rest of my life. We're built to walk uphill. When you reach the pinnacle of the hill, you want to stop and appreciate the vision. But the next thing you want is higher hill in the distance, because it's uphill climb that. It's from the uphill climb that we derive our value. It means that's technically so. Almost all the positive emotion we feel, especially in the emotion that fills up with enthusiasm that's experienced in relationship to a goal. And in some sense, you want a goal that you can never attain. So you always move closer to that goal that precedes you. As you move towards it, you think, well, it's frustrating. It's like synapse pushing the rock uphill. It's not, because as you pursue the goal, you want yourself together and your life doesn't get better and richer and more abundant. That's why the highest level of virtue and goal are, some sense, transcendent. You want them to be above everything you're doing, so you can continually move towards something that's more sublime and better. That's what you are. You are here to live, not to sleep.